Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody. It's your good old pal, your good buddy Spider, hosting the show tonight. Rob is out for the evening. He told me about it. I don't know if he told you guys about it during the Halloween party. I think he did. I don't remember, honestly. I've had a bit of a week, and, well, it's been a few weeks, actually. It's been going on a couple of months. Just stuff going on, and so I've been losing track of things here and there. Um, but anyway, you have me tonight, and it's probably going to be a bit scattered because I this whole past week I was trying to come up with. I was like, I got to do the show on Friday. What am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? And I just couldn't get anything to stick, anything very specific. So I'm kind of gonna wing it here, and hopefully we can all plow on through this one together here. Um, I hope everybody had a good Halloween. If you're into that, if you're not into it, hopefully you had a good weekend, and everything's been good since then. I know some people are gearing up for the next holiday. There's gonna be Thanksgiving. I don't know if we're gonna do like a Thanksgiving-y themed episode. Not sure. I'll talk to Rob about it sometime in the near future. I do know that for the Monday podcast, there are only 3 episodes left before season 2 is finished, and the last episode, episode 40, is going to be recorded the Sunday after Thanksgiving. My Discord doesn't work on my laptop anymore for some reason, so I can't do a regular broadcast with a guest on that Monday. But I'm still going to put it up on Monday. It's going to go up the normal time. It's just going to be pre-recorded, and it is going to have a special guest back on the show, and we are going to be telling bad jokes. BAD, bad jokes, back and forth for the entirety of the episode. And because I really don't know too many jokes of my own, I have asked the public to send me jokes. Um, and I will do as many as I can in the course of the broadcast. So, if you want me to read jokes of yours on the air that day, or record them and then post them afterwards, of course, send the jokes to the email uncannyspiritsclub@gmail.com. Once again, that is uncannyspiritsclub@gmail.com. I don't want them to get too buried in my messenger. I know some people have sent me some stuff on Messenger already, and I've tried to make sure I've collected it so I can tell it. But send the majority of it to my email from now until then, and I will definitely try to get your joke on the air. I think it's going to be a pretty fun show. You can send me some good jokes too, but I'm specifically looking for just jokes that are like groaners and just like they make you laugh, but they're not good jokes. Family friendly, please, which means no bad language and no mature themes to your jokes, because my daughter listens to that show, and she's not old enough for that yet. Okay. But on to tonight. What do we have? I had a thought, and it's something that I guess has kind of been brewing for a while, but I didn't give it a lot of serious thought. Because I've talked about, I think a few shows back, I asked if maybe our entertainment and maybe a lot of stuff is getting oversaturated with paranormal, quote unquote, paranormal content, and because there's a lot of it out there. But now I want to ask, where do you find the bulk of your paranormal news and information? And do you prefer looking for that all the time, or do you prefer, and there's no bad thing to this, I'm just asking, just getting it out, do you prefer the more entertaining parts of paranormal stuff, like certain shows and certain media that's more with jump scares and things? Some of that is really good, some of that is really kind of garbage, and some of it's in between. But how do you feel about it? And I was thinking about this because a couple, like a week before the Halloween party episode, usually in my house we start watching. My family likes to watch spooky things. Um, Thank you, James. Yeah, and I'm going to address that in a minute too because I have a few thoughts about that. Um, we have a tradition where we'll listen to like spooky tunes, like Monster Mash and things, and we'll watch old black and white movies and things like that, or we'll watch like ghost hunting shows and whatnot. And my wife prefers some things that I don't. She's more into like goofy, silly things that don't make a lot of sense because apparently she likes the punishment, I suppose. But we ended up watching an episode of Ghost Adventures with, of course, Mr. Zach Baggins, who we both know he's mostly full of it these days. Maybe when they started, they might have had some sort of integrity in there, but as it's gone on, they've been like, nah. And apparently, this episode, they had gone to the Joe Exotic Animal Preserve, the guy from Tiger King, which I've never seen. I've never actually watched that show. I know some names from it, and I know some base details, but I never really watched it when it came out during the thing. Um, and stuff like that. I'm going to address that too. Um, but somehow we got into because since the guy's been in prison, I guess nobody's actually been like people have been there taking care of the animals, but the animals now belong to. Yeah, you're probably right. I probably would hate it. I don't have a lot of tolerance for some of those things, but somebody is taking care of the animals, like former employees and things who were there. And I don't know if at some point they're going to get transported to. Well, it's owned now by Carol Baskin, who, if you watch the show, you know who that is. I only know about it because I know some details around at the time, and I think it's funny the dynamic there. But I don't know if they're going to transport the animals to where she does her operations or not. I don't know. They didn't address any of that in the course of the show, which why would they? But apparently, since it's been gone, most of the administrative buildings and all that kind of stuff have been abandoned. Like nobody really does anything there. And so they were going through because apparently, like a lot of things have happened there. Somebody committed suicide there. Um, they think, and they tried to. I'm trying to make sure I get through the chronology right because I don't want to jump too far ahead, and I'm not going to go through the whole episode for you. If you're into self pain, then by all means you can find it. Um, but they went back where there used to be an alligator pond, and what the pond is kind of still there, but there's no gators in it anymore. I don't know what happened to them. They didn't address that either. Hopefully, they didn't just kill them off because sometimes people do that with excess animals. And I'm not a big fan of that, but they went back there and they supposedly felt a presence there, and somebody supposedly there'd been bodies that had been dumped there. Story wise, nobody knew for sure, but so they took cadaver dogs, and the cadaver dogs smelled something. But then the police went out and dredged the whole thing, didn't find anything, and left. And we're like, "Nah, we're confident there's no whatever there." So it was a whole thing, and the whole time you go through it, and I'll give Zach some credit. He's become quite the showman, I guess. I know earlier on he would have the tight shirts, he'd have the big ripped muscles and things, and he'd always be like the tough guy, like the bro and things. And now he's got the big, thick glasses. He's toned down. He's not as buff anymore. He wears like the flannel shirts. He's always got that intense look in his face, like he's seen some things, and he's always got that look. But I don't know. I know it's done for the show, And maybe he genuinely feels like he's seen some things. Maybe there's a few times they've gone out there and they've experienced some things. I don't know. But you contrast that kind of thing. You can contrast that with ghost hunters, which is, it was the guys who were the plumbers during their day shift, and then they would have a team through TAPS, the paranormal folks, and they would go investigate places. And they're all like real, like settled and down to earth, and they try not to provoke. Like once in a while, they'll have somebody try to do the provoking tactic, but most of the time, they'll just go out and they'll just try to like prod a little bit and they'll have like the, oh my gosh, did you hear that? What happened? And it's a little dramatic, and they're kind of playing it up a little bit, but it's not quite the same as Ghost Adventures. Now, I don't know what the ratings difference are between the two. I don't know, and I don't care. That's not really important to me. But I'm kind of curious what sort of approach people prefer if you're going to want to be entertained by something. Like, I don't like when I try to see stuff that I would classify as paranormal content. I want to see documentaries. I want to see things where they're talking about history and they're saying, "Oh yeah, this happened," interviews and things like that. It's why I like a lot of the small town monsters films that they've put together, because they're informative. And yeah, they have like some reenactments and some dramatizations in the middle, but it's very clear that those are the dramatization parts. And the rest of it, they've got good information. They show you the locations, they have the interviews, and when they do their interviews, most of the time it's just they don't have them asking the questions. It just shows what the people are responding to on their own terms. They're not interrupted. They're just saying whatever. And that's what I prefer. But then I'm not necessarily looking to be entertained. I'm looking to learn something. If and that's exactly usually what they do. They Small town monsters usually does that. Of the ones I've seen, I haven't seen every single thing that they've done, but I have seen a lot of it. But if you are watching to be entertained, which is not a bad thing. I mean, by all means, it's on TV, it's entertainment. You paid for the channels, you might as well watch it, right? Or you paid for the streaming service. If you're watching purely for entertainment and not to like take notes or to like learn a bunch of historical facts, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the calm, like ghost hunters approach, where it's like, okay, we're here. Some once in a while, there's a scare because we heard something that startled us, or do you prefer the Zach Baggins thing, where he's constantly in there, he's got that look in his eyes, and he's always getting possessed every other episode? We watched one where he was going to a prison, but I don't remember which one it was. I don't know if it was one of the local ones around here, because there's a couple in the Ohio, West Virginia, etc. area, Pennsylvania, like the Allegheny-ish area. There's a couple of big prisons and insane asylums that aren't in operation anymore. And one of them we watched, and he went, and it just every few minutes somebody would get possessed and they'd act weird, and it was kind of like, okay. I don't find it entertaining. Other people might, whether they think it's intense or whether they think it's funny. I, it's not up to me to judge. But do you prefer that over the more realistic thing? There's a lot of that out there these days, and that's part of the saturation, I think. But the dramatization part has always kind of been around ever since I was a kid. When I was a kid, we had the alien autopsy that we like to make fun of, which was, they played it up for weeks, like, oh yeah, the alien autopsy, we're finally gonna get into the aliens. And it had, I think, it had Jonathan Frakes, who was from Star Trek, doing the narration and hosting basically, and they would show this grainy video and everything of them like cutting open these fake aliens and stuff. But they played that up, and believe it or not, because I don't think we're ever going to get around to it. It was a big serious idea for a while, but at this point, I don't think we're ever going to get around to it. At some point when we were still on the audio only before we switched to the YouTube stuff, we were going to have something like that, but it was going to be for fun and everybody was going to know it was going to be for fun. But it was going to be like a War of the Worlds kind of situation thing, and it was going to be funny. Some of you long listeners may remember way back, early on, way back with the Saint Germain stuff and all that kind of thing, where we were talking about cryptids and we talked about the Wendigo. And we played up this thing where I was supposed to fight the Wendigo. Like we were gonna go fight him and challenge him to like some WWE style match or something. And we've thought for a while that it was actually gonna be really funny. So we thought we like seriously got into it and we're like, we're gonna play this up. We were gonna like go somewhere where you could hear nature sounds and like have this like camp out and record it and act like, oh no, what happened? And then I was going to be off the show for like a month or so, just not a long time, but just long enough to play it up and be like, yeah, well, he's still missing after his fight with the Wendigo. Don't know where he is. And then I was going to show back up, and then we weren't going to talk about it anymore. Like it was just going to be like it didn't even happen. And everybody would ask, like, well, what happened with the Wendigo? Wendigo. I don't know what you're talking about. So I don't know. It seemed really funny at the time. It might not sound funny now, but it seemed really funny at the time, and we had it like all planned out. We just logistically never got around to it and didn't get it done. But so yeah, so even us, we're not, and that I don't know, maybe that was it too. And a lot of times when we have hung out and had these ideas, we've had quite a lot to drink, and sometimes that's where some of this stuff comes from. So we don't drink as much as we used to when we hang out. We have some drinking time, and then a lot of times we don't. So that might be the difference. But yeah, even us, we weren't like 100% immune to doing some things for entertainment value. And some of the other stuff, like back then, we still did a lot of we joked around. We had it was as much entertainment as it was for people to learn things. But now we're a lot more focused on people learning things and such. We're not really in it for entertainment as much. And it's hard to say which approach people prefer. And in one aspect you kind of have to cater to your audience, and in the other aspect you kind of don't have to do everything because it's still your show, and you do what you do, and you want to have some kind of integrity. And that's where a lot of it comes from. Like, I think if you're going to get into stuff like this, if you're going to go on a location and you're going to check a place out, then I think integrity is important. Like, I think if you're gonna do things that are kind of silly, I think or that are gonna be like come off as really dramatic, you should probably tell people up front, hey, you know what, there might be some drama involved. We're not professional actors, or maybe we are. I don't know. Just keep it authentic at least. But then that kind of spoils, I guess, not really the mood, but the mystique of it, or something like that, I guess. A lot of people want to suspend their disbelief when they watch some of this stuff or hear broadcasts and things like that. And some other things too. Like, I know some of the great radio shows over the years, things like Coast to Coast AM, which I believe was with Art Bell. They had a lot of stuff over the years that it was just straight talk, but it was talk like played up, and they would report on so many different stories, like the cryptid stuff, the conspiracy stuff, whatnot. And there's people who still try to do that today. But in order to keep that kind of stuff going, you have to be kind of edgy. And if you do that, the problem is you're eventually going to cross into the too edgy zone, and you're going to be not like controversy is okay. I'm not going to say being controversial is bad, but you get into that more controversial area where it's like, okay, now you're stepping on toes and you're doing this and you're doing that and you're just dividing the audience and then you get into Alex Jones territory, which Alex Jones used to be entertaining to listen to before he went full on like false flag conspiracy stuff. And I'm not going to weigh in on those issues. That's a whole other topic. But before he got like really embedded in those kind of shows, he was entertaining. Like I watched another show some years ago. I don't remember what it was called, like Monster Hunters or something. It had these two guys, seemed pretty level-headed. One guy was like redhead with a red beard and things. That's one of my favorite YouTube songs too. I love listening to that. It's hilarious. It's so funny. But they were checking out Bohemian Grove. If you guys don't know, we've talked about it before, but I'll refresh your memory. Bohemian Grove is this big patch of forest, and I don't remember off the top of my head where it's at. I could look it up, but it's not really important. They do a meet and greet thing every year with some of the world's richest and most important people, like presidents, ex-presidents, and business people, all this kind of stuff. It's very like Illuminati-esque kind of thing. So of course it's right up the alley of somebody like Alex Jones. And there's this big giant wooden carved owl statue that they all are around at the center, and it's crazy. There's the only photos we have are like black and white photos and things. But in the episode, these guys and Alex Jones, they take like a kayak to try to approach the area by water. And they get to it, but they don't get very far. And security catches them, and supposedly security arrested Alex Jones, and the other guys got away. I don't know how dramatic, like how dramatized that was, but it is a pretty serious place, and it is pretty heavy security, and they are kind of like, no, nobody gets in, nobody messes around. If you're not invited, you're not allowed in. And they take all cameras and phones and things when you're in there. Very, very like, and that's why it fuels the conspiracy stuff, because you've got all these powerful, quote unquote, powerful people gathering in here with this like big edifice and things, and supposedly there's ritual stuff that goes on, and who knows. But then you see like, oh, Alex Jones got arrested, but then years later, he's still out and about doing everything. He's fine. They didn't hurt him or anything. And you wonder like, how was it possible to be staged? Did they stage it? Who knows? It has just enough believability that you're kind of like, oh, maybe he did get arrested, but because he didn't actually do anything, just trespassing, maybe they let him go, and they never prosecuted the other guys. But they would have had to have seen that they made their broadcast sometime afterwards, and then they could have contacted them and sued them or whatever, but you never really hear about that happening. So I don't know. Stuff like that sometimes is interesting. Stuff like that can be interesting, where it's hard to tell if they're faking it or not. And you learn a few things, because they went into the history of the Bohemian Grove and all that kind of stuff, and they talked about the current conspiracy theories about it and stuff. So at least you learned something from it, which again is what I like. Now, my wife likes to watch Josh Gates. And he's another person who goes out, like he goes to historical places and he gives you a bunch of history on things. But he's real animated, he's real excited, and he goes into things, and he's always looking for pirate treasure or crashed alien ships or religious artifacts and things. And most of the time he doesn't find anything. And a lot of times he's trying to debunk stuff. Like he's trying to like, okay, well, does this thing exist? Let's see if we can find it. If not, let's figure out the reasons why it probably doesn't. But he's excitable, he's into it, and so it seems more like entertainment. But recently there was a story like we'd watched an episode where he'd gone to one of the Great Lakes. I don't remember if it was Lake Michigan or Lake Superior. I think it was Lake Michigan. And they'd been looking for these missing Civil War boats that had gone down in a storm on the lake. Because the Great Lakes are pretty treacherous. If you're not from the Lake Erie lakes, if you're not from the Great Lakes area, you might not know that they are pretty treacherous. The storms that brew up there can be pretty bad, just as bad or worse as anything you'd have in the open sea. So these ships had gone down, and nobody had been able to find them successfully yet. They'd found other things, but they hadn't found them. And so he goes out with a crew, and they find one, and you're like, oh, well, that's convenient. He found something. But like a few weeks after we'd watched that, there was something in the newspaper about the team that did that, and it was a real find. It wasn't staged for the show. They actually had, through the show, found these historical wrecks, and they mentioned him in the article and everything like that. And it was a regular like newspaper thing, and I was like, that's pretty cool. That kind of gives him some bonus points for all his like, hey, yeah, we're gonna go do this and joking around and stuff. He's putting in some real work, and it might not seem like it always from the show, but yeah, he's got a little bit more respect than some other people who just go out and be like, if there's a demon here, I hope it punches me in the face. I bet you can't do it, demon. I'm gonna stand here and wait for you to do it. Oh my gosh, did you see that? He tried to punch me in the face. I'm not as into that, but I'm kind of difficult to entertain, I guess. I don't know. I take my entertainment very seriously. And there is a lot of that out there back and forth. Ancient Aliens is another one on History Channel that started out like interesting and kind of they would go into some real historical stuff, and then you had Sukalos with and all the memes and stuff. But as that went on, as their following grew and grew and grew, it got more slickly produced. They started rehashing some of the same things, and they started kind of omitting certain details. And I don't know, a lot of them are in it more for the celebrity status now than to actually find things. They've written their books, they've shown off their artifacts and their statues and things, and all the things that they've supposedly found. And yeah, and they'll do stuff like that. Like they'll pick stuff up that's just like, oh yeah, somebody supposedly saw this or said this or described this, but then they'll present it like obviously it's fact. They won't say that because legally they got to watch the backsides, but they'll heavily imply different things just to get people to be like, oh, maybe that's true. Oh my gosh. And so it's played up a lot more. It's played up a lot more. A lot of those shows have moved that direction, unfortunately. And James brought up a good point some weeks ago, in that because we're getting all these the hearings, the UFO hearings, we had those, and we have all these the documents and stuff from last year, the year before, plus the saturation of everything in the media. It's almost an attempt to normalize it to the point where you just figure it's ridiculous, and of course you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that's not real. So when you're confronted by something that you can't necessarily explain, you're automatically going to move into, oh, it's not real. I didn't see it. Whatever it was, that stuff isn't real. I've watched it on my TV. It's all made up. Blah 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 blah. And that could be it. But it's still interesting. It's still interesting. Yeah, and there's stuff like that because they got to draw you in and they got to get their ratings and things. And I don't know how much ratings actually work these days compared to before, because I don't know how they can measure all that stuff unless they're measuring it through your cable line and whatnot. But I don't know. I don't know if any of that's really as important as it used to be, with streaming and all that. And instead, everything's being clicks and stuff like that. But even some of our contemporaries, I guess, even some of our, I guess I'll call them contemporaries, like the folks over at Night Dreams who have whatever problems they have, um, they've started cashing in on this stuff the last several years. They've started attempting to cash in by bringing in guests that are more famous for certain things than they are for others, or they've got some pretty out there kind of theories about things. Like I get kind of like I have. How do I approach this a little delicately? Because I know there are people out there who genuinely have senses that I don't, or at least I believe they do. Now, people like Long Island Medium and Miss Cleo and things like that, I'm kind of like, nah, of course not. You're just a huckster. But there are people out there who legitimately, I think, have some kind of ability. And I just, I don't have it, so I don't get it. But the trend is now to find people who say they have these abilities and push them to be as out there with it as possible. Like like those other guys, they have had a guest on. Um, they One of the people that they had on was doing remote viewing of Bigfoot. And I can't say that it's not true because I don't really know, but when I see that, I'm kind of like, okay, sure, doubtful, but sure. And things like that, and people say, "Oh yeah, I remote viewed the past of on Mars, and I can see what the Martians were like 2,000 years ago." And oh my gosh, and I'm kind of like, okay, sure. There's no way to prove it, and there's a lot of things that we cover that you can't necessarily prove. But the thing about it is, yeah, and stuff like that. And while I can't say that it's not true, there's other things that are kind of like, okay, because we can see certain things, like we can see Mars, we can see the moon, we can see this kind of stuff, and nobody knows exactly how to find Bigfoot to begin with. So how are you going to hone your ability in to find a specific Bigfoot in such a wide area across the earth, and then be able to view where they're going and what they're doing? I don't know. That takes an extraordinary amount of ability. And if you can do that, why aren't you using that for other things that would be really helpful? I don't know. Because if you have things like that, I would think it's your responsibility to use it for something more than going on somebody's podcast and watching Bigfoot. You know, I don't know. That's where the doubt comes in for me. But it's for entertainment. It's entertainment, and the thing about it is, if you're going to be for entertainment, then just make it clear that yeah, we're out to entertain people. Whereas if you're out to educate people, then say so. If you're trying to do both, then that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But just make it clear what you're all about, rather than just say, "Oh yeah, it's going to be a great show. We've got the son of Mothman here tonight, and he's going to tell us all about his dad and how he did his thing back in 19 blah, 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 blah." because that happens. You see a lot of that. And it's basically like audio tabloids. It's like audio Weekly World News, the Fiji Mermaid, and things. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there's a lack of integrity in the field right now. I mean, there probably always was, because there's always going to be people who are going to make the stuff up. Because my brain's it's been a week, so I'm pretty fried about stuff, and I know when the Mothman stuff happened. On a good day, I could just rattle out, it happened this date, on this date, and this date, here, here, and here, and I just can't do it right now. It's in there. It's in there somewhere. And this is me sober. I can't think straight. So it's been that kind of week. But losing my train of thought here. Yeah, integrity. Integrity is lacking in a serious way, because so many shows and movies and radio and everything has come up, websites and everything, to talk about all this stuff. And a lot of it's just rehashed, or it's a repeat of a repeat of a repeat of a story that you heard from another website, that heard it from another website, that heard it from someplace else. And so there's no sources for anything. Even if you have the sources, you can't track any of them down. And meanwhile, these cats are just going to beg me to eat all the time because they're little fatties. But oh, what are you doing, Mouthy? He's not even my cat. He's not even my cat. He's my wife's cat. He always just comes up to bother me, though, don't you? And I don't know if I really have a resolution for that. Like, I could hope for more authenticity in the field, but it's one of those things that, for better or for worse, it draws a certain kind of mindset, and you end up with the people who are more like than otherwise. And I don't want to make fun of mental health or anything, especially not where I've been in my head the last month or so. But you got a lot of people who probably should not be doing the type of stuff that we do, based on where they're at mentally, and they'll go to conventions and things like that and all that stuff. So moving on a bit. I'm going to see if I can add another topic or something here. They are finding a lot more historical things, and I think I've brought this up a few times over the last few episodes. They are finding a lot more historical things that are pushing back against certain long-standing ideas of human history. They found a new set of skull pieces and bones and things for the skull that came from a humanoid relative, which, when they say that, it could be a Denisovian, or it could be a Neanderthal, or it could be, anything that's not Homo erectus, which is modern man, is a humanoid ancestor. And they found one that's closer to, the famous missing link that has always been kind of searched for. Everybody's been trying to find the missing link, which is a set of bones or remains that are in between humans and apes, to in just the right spot where you can see where the one evolved into the other, if you believe in that. I'm not trying to push anything on anybody, but they keep finding new stuff. Like, they found this new set of skull pieces that, when tested, fit more in that central area where things kind of started switching over. Um, they found the oldest shoes ever made by a human long ago, and they were like 1,000 years earlier than when we thought we would have been wearing shoes or certain articles of clothing. And that's interesting. It just goes to show that there was a lot more civilization a lot further back than we expected. Um, and then they found that they found some sort of trail of evidence in Europe that showed that ancient people had lived there many, many thousands of years before previously thought, had then gone to, what are you doing? Had then gone to Africa. And then after they had gone to Africa and spent some time there and people had reproduced, that's when out of Africa started occurring, which is interesting because it used to be that the assumption was that the core theory for human development was the out of Africa theory, was that we developed here in Africa, not like here in my living room in Ohio, but in Africa, and then spread everywhere else. And there were no significant pockets of humanoids around before that explosion outwards. But it's showing more and more that while that was a big push, that people did spread from there in large numbers, and it was a major migration to populate the planet. It also shows that people went there first in significantly major amounts to show that there were significant populations on other parts of the globe prior to that big spread. And that's interesting. And I don't like to get people too upset because people will start thinking about culture and they'll be like, "Oh, you're saying that this culture wasn't as important and blah blah blah. You're taking down my ancestry," and I'm not. I'm not trying to attack anybody. But it's super interesting to know that we're finding more and more evidence that there were more people in more parts of the world that count as people earlier and earlier and earlier. And we know that the various humanoid species interbred with each other. We know that Neanderthal mated with modern man. We know that the Denisovians and all these other people, they interbred because they were all compatible physiologies. So it stands to reason that you would get larger tribes or towns or villages or whatever of people across the globe. And we're finding more and more of that kind of thing here in North and South America as well. Because initially, the thought was that North America, especially, had been kind of empty of people until like the Native Americans, and even then they kept in smaller pockets with no significant civilization of any kind. But we're finding more and more that humans from other places came here much earlier than expected. And while they might not have made any major cities and things, they did stay here for significant amounts of time and they did interact with the locals, or the locals developed from them. And then, of course, South America, you have all these vast cultures, the Mayans, the Inca, the Aztec, the Olmec, the Toltecs, all these different groups. And I think it's ludicrous to think that none of those cultures, at least a few of them, didn't go as far north as they could go and get into North America and stay there and multiplied. And it's exciting to see how we're finding more of this stuff coming up. And and I'm looking forward to seeing more of those things and hopefully catch some real good connections between one half of the globe and the other, because I think there's a lot more there that Yeah, I got a cough. I started. I've had something going on, like allergies or something for a while now. Nothing major. Like I don't have flu stuff. I'm not like bedridden or anything like that. It's no major virus disease. But I've had like something going on, and then just a couple days ago, I started getting a nasty cough, probably from the weather. The weather got cold here in Ohio. We had snow a few days back, out of nowhere. It didn't stick, but we had it, and so now it's bugging me. I always get something around this time of year. Um, Now the dog is coughing too, because solidarity. And the other thing is too, to switch gears back to the beginning of the topic again. Um, Talking about oversaturation and paranormal entertainment, I've noticed that there is a lot more possession style movies and shows that have been coming out the last few years. Um, we've got the Conjuring universe now. It's not just a franchise of Conjuring movies, it's the Conjuring and the Nun and the Nun 2 and all this other stuff. And there's all this possession by evil and things going on. And it's interesting because of how hard most of the country tries to push for not having, and The Exorcist too. A good portion of the country has pushed so hard to be not religious anymore for the last 20 or so years, or longer. I don't know. It only became a significant factor as far as I'm aware in the last 20 years with like say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas and whatnot and all those things. And and so it's just funny that during a time when we're trying to portray um, religion as outdated and spirituality as something that people don't really need and whatever, not grounded in reality and things, that during that time there are so many movies coming out about possession by evil spirits and by demons and the devil and this and that and other kind of thing to keep the whole idea alive. I'm not sure where exactly I was going to go with that, but I just found it really kind of interesting. But I'm pretty much tapped out. I'll tell you that. It's an early night, I know, but I got the cough and I haven't really felt too good up here. Um, Nothing to worry about though. Like I'm not having thoughts or anything like that. So I don't want anybody to get worried and think you got to stage an intervention or something. It's fine. We have our days. We all go through our stuff. But hopefully the next time I do one of these, I'll be a bit more cohesive and I'll have a general actual topic to talk about. Because, like I said, I was fighting all week trying to come up with something and do some research on something, and nothing would stick. Nothing would. Every idea I have is like, I don't know, we've done that recently, or this is a difficult topic to do with one person without having like a back and forth about, and so I don't know. But Rob should be back next week. And he usually takes the reins on this kind of stuff anymore, so we'll have that. What else do we have going on? I've missed several days of my morning show because I just haven't felt good about it. And but I'm gonna get back into it. I am gonna get back into it. I don't want to just start it all up and then be really neglectful, because I know people do like that. I've had a lot of people actually listen to it, and even though I haven't had a lot of comments, I have had a few, and people be like, "Oh yeah, and I can be a little more controversial than that. I think I wasn't. I'd been seeing so much news that I was kind of like, I didn't like where the news was. I took a couple mini breaks, and this was more like a don't want to touch it. But I have a lot of content I have to catch up on. I got to catch up on that. I got to catch up on the game streams. I haven't streamed anything since since before Halloween. And but Monday, of course, is going to be the next episode of the audio podcast. There's 3 episodes of that left, so I'm going to have 2 something or other, whatever I can come up with, and then we're going to do the bad jokes one after Thanksgiving. That'll go up. That'll be uploaded for the Monday after Thanksgiving. And I don't know what all Rob has going on. I think he has some places he was going to be this month for presentations, but I don't remember for sure. Hopefully he'll tell us all about that when he gets back. And yeah, so that's all we have going on for the moment. Until then, I'd like to thank James and Deadpool both for stopping in. I'm not sure I was super entertaining this time or even super educational. I might have just been all rehashed tonight, but still appreciate having you guys show up. And I will catch everybody next time around. Until then, have a good night.